Hello everyone, Nubkeks here and welcome to a Heroes of the Storm discussion video. Today we're going to be talking about supports, and what this is going to be based on is the new post from Blizzard, which is called Let's Talk Supports. So let's talk supports. What we're going to do in this video, I'm going to read through this post. It's fairly long, there's quite a lot of details in here. They're talking all about and looking for community feedback on how to improve the support role within the game, and just the design of the game on a larger scale. Let's actually close Facebook as well. And yeah, basically we're going to go through this. I'm going to give my thoughts as well. I've been thinking about this a good bit, and I have some ideas I think that might help or be interesting. My nose is itchy, so apologize if I need to scratch my nose during this video. Anyway, let's get into it, and let's get going. So hello all. In case you missed our previous discussion, feel free to check out the thread. Blah, 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 blah. Let's dive into sports. Okay. Yada yada yada. So they're going to briefly explore three things here. So number one, healing is a big part of what makes support characters feel powerful and fun to play in Heroes of the Storm. These are some of our favorite characters. We're not looking to drastically change the way they play. Okay, so they don't want to radically change the support role. They're willing to make, I think, small changes or changes to the meta, but they don't want to just drastically rework all these heroes, and that's fine. Again, the way Blizzard reworks heroes, it's something I've noticed in comparison to like League of Legends, which I played before. In League of Legends, they'd rework heroes and they would literally just completely change the hero. It was like, right, take the old hero, throw them out, let's even change the way they look and just change all of their abilities, everything that they do. In Heroes of the Storm, they don't do that. When they rework heroes, they basically keep the functionality almost identical. They just tweak the numbers, they rework the talents and stuff like that, but they don't fundamentally change how heroes play. Or like very rarely, or to a very small degree. Like for example, Kel'Thas, they changed some of the functionality with how his trait, his verdant spheres, interacts with some of his abilities to a small extent, but like no radical sweep. Very rarely do they make a sweeping change. The biggest change I can think is Sylvanas removing possession as an heroic and giving her mind control instead. That's the biggest change I can think of, and that's pretty unique. They rarely do that. Number two, then, not all characters are going to fit your playstyle. It's okay that Lily is more straightforward to play, whereas Rhaegar is an aggressive playstyle. I agree. One of the main points I want to make is that there are so few supports and there are so few playstyles in the support role that it's not necessarily that the individual support characters are bad, though I think some of them are. I think it's more so the broader problem is that there's just so few of them, and that they represent, there's not enough diversity between them. I think it's going to be one of the main things. But yeah, I totally agree that, hey, some of them, like Lily, cool, she's easy to play, that's cool. Rhaegar's aggressive play, that's cool. I like what they're saying here. I just think the problem is going to be that there's not enough. Additional depth and complexity can come in the form of talents. Uther's base kit is quite simple, however at a highly competitive level, Piano Uther is seen as the optimal way to play, adding another layer of depth. Yeah, this is something that's really interesting, because I'm working on a video at the moment as well, which is like kind of a guide on what heroes to pick in Hero League when you're trying to climb the ladder. And one of the things I bring up in that is that you want to pick heroes that are, relatively simple to play, that aren't too challenging, because then you can focus. You don't want to devote your brain power to playing a very mechanically difficult hero. You want to be devoting it to the larger strategy of like, okay, what are my team doing? How do we play this objective? What do we go on the map? You want to be doing more of that stuff than just going like, oh, how do I use my abilities? Like Piano Uther, for example. Oh my god, like how do I use all these buttons? And I did a video playing Piano Uther the other day, and well, a couple of weeks ago, I guess, or 3 weeks ago, a month ago. Yeah, like it was the first time I played Piano Uther, and one of the things I noticed was, hey, using all these extra 4 buttons, for the first few games, that takes a lot of thought process, and you kind of do stupid stuff because of it. But yeah, looking at the supports, one of the things I noticed when I was talking about or thinking about the supports is that a lot of them are actually fairly difficult to play, which is quite interesting. I don't think that depth and complexity are a massive issue for a lot of the supports. Like sure, Lily's very easy. I think Lieutenant Morales is very easy as well. However, I think Karazim is very difficult to play. I think Tyrande is very difficult to play. I initially thought Tassadar was really easy to play, but then I was looking at his win rates, which are terrible at the lower leagues, and I was kind of going, why is that? And I think it's a dual problem. Even that it's like fitting him into a composition is apparently difficult. Then also I think maybe it's the shielding stuff, being preemptive. It's kind of difficult in itself, even though I thought Tassadar should really be quite easy to play, but he seems to be kind of hard. Like Uther with Piano Uther is quite difficult to play as well. Rhaegar can be challenging to get the most out of him. I think one of the issues maybe is that, for example, with Rhaegar, it's easy to be effective without playing him to his max. I think, if you just sit back and just throw out heals, you can be pretty useful as Rhaegar, when really you should be more aggressive. Perhaps they went a bit too far with that, but they did just change him in the last patch to boost his aggression. They buffed his aggression, and they nerfed his healing, his base healing. So I think that's a good change. So I think Rhaegar's in a great spot, actually, and there's a good skill level, like, spectrum for that hero. Brightwing is pretty difficult to play well, I think. Malfurion, I suppose, is somewhat easy. I don't play him much, actually, so I can't speak too much for him. But just kind of looking at them as an overview, I actually feel like there is quite a range of complexity and challenge and depth across the supports. Again, I think maybe the only issue is that there aren't enough of them. But I think within the ones we have, you got a good mix of difficulties. It's not like they're all really easy or that they're all really hard. I think you got some, like Lily, who are really easy, and some like Karazim are actually really difficult. And that's good. Yeah, cool. So all this being said, we agree there's room for improvement. If most of your power comes from standing in the back line and not paying attention to enemy heroes, this is an area we definitely want to improve. We think we can tackle this through some base kit changes and future talent redesigns. We will also keep this in mind when designing future support heroes. Okay, so they're going to split this into two sections, an other thought section and then an idea around playmaking and kind of carrying the game. So we've heard from the community that our supports are not playmakers, so let's discuss. We agree that support players should have the ability to make big plays, and this is likely an area we can improve. However, let's define what this means. So 3 parts of what they define this as meaning. So number 1, supports are not assassins. We do not plan to push supports in a direction that allows them to quickly mop up an enemy team or secure a bunch of kills. Yeah, I like, that's fine. You obviously don't want to make supports like assassins, these bursty heroes. I think it's cool if you run into one of a support hero on their own. Like, it's fair that you don't feel like super threatened. Like, sometimes you do feel a little bit threatened. Like, if you're in a bad spot, or maybe you're a weak solo hero yourself, you might say, "Oof, it's actually kind of difficult to trade with this." Like, if you run into a Rhaegar on his own, or a Karazim, or maybe like a Tyrande or something like that, or Lily, even. Lily sometimes. These heroes they can beat you up a little bit if you're not careful. I think they're in a good spot with that. I think Tyrande is a really interesting hero in like reflecting this. Because one of the things I think they could do, one of the potential things they could do with supports, is add like a bit more damage in them. I think Tyrande is a great example. Tyrande, you can build her for damage, and she does an absolutely crazy amount of damage. You can top the hero damage meters with Tyrande if you go for like an owl build with Starfall. It does crazy damage. But the thing is, it's not like an assassin's damage. It's not single target or bursty. For her to get off the single target burst, it's all about, she's still setting up her allies with like a stun with her Lunar Flare, and then her Hunter's Mark, making them vulnerable. Then a lot of her damage is coming from like this poke with the owls, or like just AoE damage in the team fight, or Starfall, which is doing AoE damage in team fights or zoning them out. It's like you can build her as a very damage focused support. However, that damage is not being done in the way that an assassin would do it. Like, it's not like a Li Ming or a Kel'Thas, even. Like, there's some similarities between Phoenix and Starfall, I guess, but or like Vala or someone like that, or Zeratul. It's a very different way of dealing her damage. I think she's like a really great example of a support done well. I really do. We'll come back to her as well, because I got more things to say about that. We'll burst through this bit first, and then I'll give some of my ideas here. Supports bring a ton of value in supporting their allies. This often occurs through healing, but could be through a move speed buff, a well-timed CC, vision, etc. Now, I thought this was really interesting because we just had a hero released in the game. This guy is called Medivh. You might have heard of him. What does Medivh do? Well, move speed buff. He doesn't give move speed buffs, but he does do portals, which are kind of like that. Well-timed CC. Yeah, he does his heroic abilities. Both of those are CC abilities. Vision. Well, hey, vision is a huge part of what he does with his trait, etc. Hey, isn't that really interesting? But wait, Medivh is not a support. Even though he's doing all these things that are supporting his allies, he's not a support. Well, that's interesting. And even he's a specialist. Even unique among specialists, he still has like the healing done stat in the stat screen. And it makes you step back and go, wait. Again, it's a question I've raised in previous videos. It's a question people are raising all the time. Why is Medivh not classed as a support? Now, I think the issue is that they didn't class him as a support for the purpose of quick match matchmaking. That, in my opinion, one of the big problems with supports, and they're talking about the idea of them being heal bots as well. One of the things that makes this a problem is that the heal bot support heroes are so powerful, they're so impactful. Having a solo hero like Rhaegar, Kharazim, or Uther, someone with like this big, like bursty heals, someone that can save someone that's like a solo healer, is so powerful. It gives whatever team has that like a massive advantage over a team that doesn't. So I think the issue is that in quick match, hey, if you went into a quick match, and again, it has a rule so that it will always try as much as it can to match a team with support against a team with another support, that what would happen if like one team gets Rhaegar and the other team gets Medivh is that, well, the team with Rhaegar is going to have a huge advantage because Rhaegar can heal and Medivh can't. And that is a problem. That's a problem with the game design right there. If your supports, yeah, if you're trying to bring value in terms of supporting allies through this all these other things, however, the thing that really makes support stands out is their healing, and therefore you can't even make a support a hero who's clearly a support and does all these things. In fact, focuses completely on those things, but that if you match him up in a matchmaking system, the quick matchmaking system, against someone who just does healing, he would get crushed. Now, I think the problem with Medivh, obviously, is that, well, he's just been buffed in the patch that is literally just came live last night. Quite significantly buffed, actually, but like in the release state, Medivh had like a 26% win rate, very weak hero. But yeah, like that is a problem, isn't it? That surely is a problem. He's very clearly a support. He supports his allies. It's what he does. You know, describe, what does Medivh do? Describe what Medivh does. He supports his allies. But Blizzard hasn't labeled him as a support. I think that's a big problem. I think it's a really big problem. It's something I said before as well. It's like, that really indicates that they're kind of stuck or struggling with a heal bot meta because they're not comfortable placing a very clearly supporting character into the supporting role, and they should do that. In my opinion, they should just bite the bullet and say Medivh is a support, he's a support, and then they should make more heroes like Medivh, and then quick matchmaking wouldn't be so bad because you start getting all these utility sports matched up against each other. You'd have people actually learn to play around it and to play with it, and maybe we'd see a change in the metagame and it'd be okay, instead of just being like, oh, no healer, we lose. That's a big problem. But I think the Medivh thing, combined with this line, really illustrates one of the huge problems here. Many heroic abilities including a well-timed ancestral heal, a perfectly placed force wall, or a clutch divine shield can all change the outcome of a team fight. Yeah, that's very true. And that's one of the satisfying things about playing supports, for sure. It's that, you know, yeah, you do have playmaking ability through those things. I think the issue, though, is that that is one of the only ways that you can change the outcome of a game as a support. Let's say I play Sonya, for example. As Sonya, I can do a pretty good job in a solo lane. I can go into a solo lane and do a pretty good job doing that. Then on top of that, I can also do mercenaries really well by myself. So I can, during the game, go, okay, guys, you know, it hits the 2-minute timer, the siege camp spawns. Guys, I'm going to that siege camp at 2 minutes. I'm going to get us the siege camp as early as possible. It's going to push the lane. Let's say in Cursed Hollows or something. I'll get us the siege camp. It will push during that first tribute. And that is a huge way that I can impact the fight. You can do that on Rhaegar, by the way. Rhaegar can do this as well. He's actually quite good at taking siege camps, but none of the rest are, unfortunately. And then, like, on top of that, as Sonya, I'm also like, okay, in the team fight, I'm massively impactful. I can function as a warrior. I can also do crazy damage. And then, like, she gets massive power spikes late game with her defensive talents and such. It's like, as Sonya, there's so much that you can do. Whereas, let's say, as Kharazim, I can't really do merc camps very quickly. Can't really wave clear. Can't really solo lane. Pretty much all I can do is run around with my team and help them out. And then, yeah, sure, I land that clutch divine palm, which, like, changes the course of the team fight, and that's awesome. But that's the only thing I'm doing that's awesome, because there's very little that I can actually do on my own. It's like, yes, they're right, but it's like, this is kind of, for a lot of heroes, this is the extent of it. Same thing with Uther. Like, what are you going to do as Uther? You're going to run around with your team. You're going to heal them. Like, you can kind of soak a lane a bit. Like, they can go soak a lane, but they're not good at the wave clear. They can't do it well. It's not ideal. It's like a stopgap solution. It's like pretty much the only thing these two guys are here for is to heal their team. as their team run around and do things. And yeah, then to do these clutch, heroic abilities that change the course of a team fight. But apart from that, they don't do anything. Whereas other heroes, other roles can do so much. Like assassins or specialists can be like pushing the waves. They can like pressure structures. They can create map presence. They can do merc camps. Same with a lot of warriors, or they can like do ganks and stuff like that. It's like, oh shit, the Uther gank is coming in. No, it's not. Like Uther can't gank anyone. There's so many ways that you can be a playmaker in the game, and supports have most supports have a very limited range of what they can actually do. We think we can address this feedback with some simple base kit changes. With Lieutenant Morales, we're currently exploring changing the way her displacement grenade functions. Instead of automatically detonating at the first enemy hero, we've changed it so the player chooses when the detonation occurs along its path, and then it will explode automatically at max range. And a small change like this will let a skilled Lieutenant Morales player to choose if knocking away the enemy or pushing them towards her team is the correct call. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Like, that's a cool little change. It's an extra thing she can do. I think it's good. Yeah, I think that's fine. But it's a small thing in general. And look, I mean, Lieutenant Morales is like the definition of a heal bot as it is, right? She is the definition of a heal bot. The most heal body of characters. And you know what? Like they said up here, not all characters are going to fit your playstyle. You know what? If we have one hero that's the very definition of a heal bot, that's okay with me. In terms of playstyle, that's okay with me. So long as it doesn't disrupt the meta and make the meta all about heal bots, which is kind of the problem in general at the moment. But, just in terms of design, if we've one hero like that, that's fine. That's, in fact, that's actually a good thing, because people who enjoy that playstyle get to play it, and that's cool. I like that. I like this idea, though, of adding a bit more complexity to how these kits function. I mean, that's like one good example. It's probably the best example I could think of. Other examples I can think of, and in fact, I was reading some of this. I think over here, actually, this comment was really good. Actually, I've only read a couple of these, but this one was cool. So look, for example, they mentioned movement speed buff as one area of making plays. So shout out to this guy, Vibrunazo, over here on Reddit. Like, shout out to him. This is all him, so, don't want to take any credit for this. Look at the move speed buffs that exist for supports. They're ridiculously small compared to heals and shields. How are we supposed to make plays with those? Huh? One talent that often comes up is the additional move speed on Brightwing's shield at level 13, Pixie Boost. With the decay on the bonus, that talent increases the total displacement from 20%. Pixie Dust, her E, normally gives people a 20% movement speed buff, which is almost nothing, he says, to 35%, which is still too small. Neither the talented nor the untalented buff can make plays. Now imagine if the talented buff increased the total displacement by, say, 60%. Now that is something supports can use to make big plays, both offensively or defensively. But yeah, so this is a huge issue that, on level 13 for Brightwing, you have this Pixie Boost, which makes your move speed a little bit faster, or you can get, like Shielding Dust, which gives them like a 4-second spell shield on a 10-second cooldown, which is insanely good. And it's just poorly balanced. So, I mean, that's one thing they could do, is make these movement speed affecting things more powerful. I know Tastar has a movement speed talent as well. That's almost never taken. I take it sometimes, though, because it's cool, but it's almost never taken. But yeah, like, you could look into doing something like that. Like, actually, movement speed is massively impactful. More mobility is a huge deal. We could boost that area of supports, give them more movement speed. That is definitely one option here. Okay, you know what? Let's run through this last little bit real quick, and then I'm going to give you some of my ideas and some of the things I've been thinking about. I think it'll make more sense if we can just have everything that they're saying on the table first. So there's just a couple of other thoughts here. They want a flexible meta. We want the meta to vary over time and change based off the map. We like that the current meta allows for 1 to 2 support characters per team. We feel this offers a lot of variety in team comp and play experience. We'd occasionally like to see some 0 support team comps, but very rarely. But that's obviously they haven't achieved that yet, because I cannot think of any team composition that without supports, like a support-less team composition, that cannot be improved by removing one of the, say, assassins or warriors or specialists and replacing them with Rhaegar. Like, I cannot think of any team that is not improved by having Rhaegar in the place of, like, a non-support hero. I can't. They're too good. It's one of the problems. It's too useful what they do and what they bring. That healing that they bring is too strong. So yeah, I don't think 0 support team comps are viable. I can't think of any. Let me know. Maybe you do have some sort of like quirky strategy that works without support. Like I've seen it work, but it's been messy. And I don't think it's ever ideal. I don't think it's ever ideal to have no support. I think support always gives your team like a stronger chance of winning. It always increases your win percentage to have support on your team. Always. Yeah, so they like that there's 1 to 2 supports are allowed. Now the thing is that the meta is not super flexible though, is it? Like it's very much focused on like you need a solo healer. Then we have like say Tassadar or Medivh. It's like okay, they will probably fit in as a secondary support, but they won't fit in as the solo support. Or like Tyrande as well, very interesting one. Again, I think she's difficult to play, so that's why you don't see her so much. She can work as a solo support. I think Tassadar can work as a solo support as well. Medivh probably can too, but it's difficult to make it work, and you're not going to find that like it kind of goes against the meta, so it's not going to work because it's going to tilt your teammates in Hero League, because people don't understand when it can work. So like the likelihood of having someone who knows, okay, solo support Tassadar will work in this situation, and having your teammates go, oh yeah, that's cool, we see that it works in this situation, isn't going to happen. More than likely you'll have most people pick it in a bad spot, or then your teammates are going to freak out, go, oh my god, solo support Tassadar, this is terrible, GG, whatever, I'm done. Yeah, that's a problem. But I do think that, 1 to 2 supports is cool. I think one of the issues is that, again, there's so few support characters. Like, who do you fit in that second support slot? Well, up to now, it's pretty much like Tassadar, Tyrande. Okay, cool. Either of those two. Now we're going to have Medivh, so that's like an extra character that fits in like the second support role. But it would be nice to see more variety in terms of the meta for sure. That there's more variety in terms of what you can bring in a single support role. Now, this is something as well I think is a problem. Is that if they just keep introducing supports like Medivh, the Medivh problem, let's call it the Medivh problem. You introduce supports who support in ways that are not healing. That is, they bring utility, like vision, move speed buffs, crowd control, anything, all that sort of stuff they're mentioning, anything like that. What will happen is, if the healing supports stay in the same position, you will develop a very strong 2 support meta where you have 1 healing support and 1 utility support. It's already a very strong team comp right now. It's very, very strong. It's underrated. But that is what will develop. I want to see them bring in a lot more of these supports that do this utility stuff. And again, they need to make Medivh a support. They should do that. However, again, it's like, will it work out so that, okay, it's like, oh, we can choose between a utility or a healer. Okay, well, we'll bring utility because it got these pros and cons, or bring a healer because it got these pros and cons. It will never be a choice in the current state of the game because healers are so impactful. It will be, okay, we need a healer. Now, do we want a utility support or do we want another just damage dealer or warrior? And that's an issue with the design, that the healers are too impactful. They're much, much too impactful. I've got some ideas on how they can deal with it. We'll come to that in a second. Let's go through this very last thing here. It is not off the table for us to retune the total healing output of support characters. For example, we could decrease the healing by 30% and increase health pools by 30%. A change like this likely means that a healer is more about mitigating immediate loss in a team fight and less capable of constantly topping off their team. While it's a perfectly viable direction for us to explore, I don't think it addresses either of the core concerns we've been hearing regarding making big plays or being considered heal bots. The floor is now open. Please add your thoughts, yada, yada, yada. So this last one, I think this one is interesting. I think there actually is some value in this, at least to look at it. Maybe it doesn't need to be that extreme, but maybe to a smaller extent. Make the healing like, yeah, it's really good, but it's not necessarily as huge a thing. So yeah, it's going to be like 30% weaker or something. That the healing is still impactful. It still matters to have a healer. Because essentially a healer, the reason they're so good is that they multiply the effectiveness of your other characters. By healing them up, you multiply the effectiveness. Whereas, let's say you've got 1 warrior and let's say you've got 2 warriors and 2 assassins, okay? And you've got Kharazim as your 5th hero. So you can choose between like, let's say you can choose between, I don't know, Vala or Kharazim as your 5th hero to go with your 2 warriors, 2 assassins. Why is Kharazim so good? Well, Kharazim is so good. So Vala is just like having an extra 5th hero. That's cool. But Kharazim is doing, he does a little bit of damage, not as much as Vala. But on top of that, he's also healing heroes. And on top of that, he also has Divine Palm, which gives like a second life to one of your assassins. So it kind of turns them It's like the healing keeps your team alive so much longer and neutralizes like the burst, what the enemy team is trying to do. Then you also have Divine Palm, which is like a second life for one of your heroes. And that just adds up to being more valuable than having just a plain old other hero. It just adds up to more. That's why it's so strong. So I think there still is value in healing, even if you reduce the healing. And what this might do, the reason I'm saying this change might be good, is that it would then open up, I think, a bit more the opportunity to have like utility supports play more of a role. That it's like, okay, well, if healing is still really useful, but it's not as strong because it's not about topping people off. It's just kind of like countering some like immediate burst or whatever and enabling heroes to stay in it longer. Well, in that case, the trade-off between having a healer and having utility support, it might be more of a thing you can choose. That they're both still really useful, but it might depend on the team comp, and you can go for different things. Because they do need to do something along these lines. They do need to do something that makes healing less impactful to open up the door to have other forms of supporting actually become a viable second option. Not as a second option like a second hero, but as another option within that one supporting hero role that you really want to have on your team. So, okay, I have a few ideas of what they could do to make supports better. So number one, another way they could add playmaking ability to supports. Another thing they can do, again, I don't think complexity is needed. I actually think, again, like I said, that you have a nice range of complexity within supports. I think they need to tone down healing or make healing less impactful to give more range to utility supports. I also think it's fine that you've got different types of playstyle. I don't think it's an issue that we have like a heal bot like Lieutenant Morales, or that some heroes can do like big heals or divine shields, big healing playmaking ability. That's fine as well. Here's what they should do, or what they could do. Here's some things they could do, I should say that. Some ideas. I don't know if they're good ideas, and give me feedback, but I think they're pretty good. Some of the stuff they could do at the moment, in terms of initiating team fights, the ability to initiate team fights is overwhelmingly in the hands of the warrior role. Okay, so the warriors, they're great at. Warriors have the ability to start off fights. That's what they do. They bring the most crowd control. Their crowd control is of a nature that you can start a fight, like dwarf tossing in with a stormbolt, power sliding in and face melting someone back. Shadow charge in, flip someone back. They have a lot of ways to start the fight. You really don't have very much of that on the side of assassin specialists or supports. For example, it's one of the reasons that Thrall is so powerful, because the Sundering is a way to initiate the team fight. You throw a Sundering through the enemy team, maybe like split them in half with a stun, and then hey, the team is divided, you knock half towards your team and half away, and boom, sweet, you've just started the team fight as the assassin player. That's one of the reasons why Thrall is so good. Very few assassins specialist supports have that ability. I mean, if we look at these supports, none of them really have very much of an ability to start team fight. Maybe Tyrande with like a Lunar Flare kind of, or a good Force Wall. They're a very short range. It's nowhere near as reliable. Or like a Water Dragon, maybe from Lily. But on the whole, supports are not starting team fights. So that is something you could look at doing, is giving supports crowd control in the sense of something that can initiate a team fight. Maybe Medivh's Leyline Seal is a nice example of this could work. Again, we haven't seen any really good Medivh play because he's got a 20% win rate at the moment. But I think Medivh, possibly, one of the things he could do very well is maybe initiate fights with like a Leyline Seal coming from the Fog of War, zoom, catch a couple of heroes, and then you force a fight with your supporting hero. That's cool. They should look into doing more of that. If you can bring that into supports, that could be kind of awesome. And that could shake up the meta quite a lot. It could also shake up the warrior meta and make it so that you don't necessarily need a warrior who can initiate team fights if your support is able to do it. So you could see more from heroes like maybe Artanis or Rexar, like warriors who are really cool but don't have initiation or necessarily disengage. So that could work well. You could also have supports that can disengage more strongly. Let's take a look at these. So you don't have a ton of disengage on supports either. That's kind of interesting. You could make it stronger. They have some to some degree. The one that obviously stands out to me the most would be like a Emerald Wind from Brightwing, but it's not taken as much, though I do like that they've buffed it recently. You could have like a sort of displacement grenade or a root kind of helps, or a really good force wall definitely helps. So you can even give supports more ways to disengage a fight, though maybe that's not the route they want to go down because they want to encourage more fighting. So that one's a little bit shaky. I want to go back to Tyrande, because Tyrande is really interesting. Again, Tyrande is an example of a hero She's got really bad wave clear, so hey, you could add more supports with good wave clear. One of the things I really like about Tyrande is that you have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of her talents at the moment. Now, for the most part, her owl build is just straight up the best. No question there. But at levels 10 and 13, you've got some really interesting choices. In fact, let me open up like a talent calculator. Heroes of the Storm talent calculator. Let's open this up. There we go. Let me go to this so I can actually show you visually and it will make more sense. Okay, down here. So Tyrande, so you're gonna probably go for like Empower, Pierce. Over here you got like a couple of choices. Let's say Lunar Blaze, probably the most common. I prefer Lunar Momentum, but let's say Lunar Blaze. Then like over here you're probably gonna go for Ranger, let's say. Now, let's talk about level 10, 13, and 20, because these are the interesting ones, because you genuinely have choices here. Level 10 is so interesting for Tyrande because she has two very viable heroics. Number one is Shadowstalk, which is a healing ultimate, a healing heroic, a big healing one. And then the second one is Starfall, which is a big AoE damage heroic. And both of these are really good choices, and whichever one you choose is going to radically change how Tyrande plays. At level 13 then, you have this Overflowing Light. So when you're above 50% health, it buffs the healing of her Q by 30%. This is actually a huge deal. And this is basically what I take. This is what turns Tyrande into a viable solo support. It's this talent right here, as well as Shadowstalk, potentially. But this like improves her healing and her burst healing so much. This makes her really good. But crucially is like you could also take, well, that's pretty, Huntress Fury is pretty bad. You get Sprint or Shrink Ray or something like that. You got some interesting options here. But fundamentally, I think what this shows with Tyrande, with like these choices here, is that as a support hero, she functions still as a support hero. She's still, again, like on her own, she's not going to do anything. She's not an assassin. She doesn't have that like single bursty or like kind of assassin-y type playstyle. No matter how you build her, she's not an assassin. She's very much about supporting her team. Look how much utility she has as well. Like she's got Sentinel, which, you know, gives vision or interrupts like channelings and turn-ins and stuff like that. Lunar Flare, again, which is like a short AoE stun. Hunter's Marker trait, which makes people vulnerable and reveals them. She's doing so. She brings so much utility, and then you can also build her either as like this. Boom! I'm gonna build Tyrande as like this super damage dealing hero, and her healing's gonna be terrible. You know, it's like a little bit of extra healing, but it's not great. But then she's not also being an assassin. She's just like this supporting hero, bringing tons of utility, but also doing a ton of damage, but in a non-assassin-y or not even sort of a specialist way, like this sort of very spread, pokey or AoE zoning type damage. She'll do a ton of it and be very impactful. And she'll bring kill pressure with Hunter's Mark and Lunar Flare setting up her allies. But again, it's a very different type of support. Or you could build her as like this super supporty one with Shadowstalk and Overflowing Light. And suddenly you're healing a whole ton, and then you're still doing like the Hunter's Mark and the Lunar Flares and the stuns and the vision and the vulnerability. You're still bringing a lot of utility. I think that's really cool, and what I want to highlight here, this is something they need to do, is with the other supports, what they can do, and importantly when they design future supports, in my opinion, is you make these supports and you don't make them like good healers by default, okay? So Tyrande, she's got like she's got like okay-ish healing and okay-ish utility by default. That's what she does. And okay-ish damage. She's kind of like meh at everything by default. What determines Tyrande and how she's going to function in the game is how you build her with the talents. You can make her a good healer with talents. You can make her do good damage with talents. You can improve her utility with talents. You can build her for auto attack if you want, though it's weaker. But crucially, she's not really good at something by default, but the talents is what defines her. And then you've got flexibility, and you can mix it up depending on how the match is going, depending on the team composition. You can say, okay, well, I'm actually not going to take healing here. I think actually Shrink Ray is going to fit better, or I'm going to go really aggressive with Sprint and my positioning and stuff like that. They can do that with these heroes a bit more. At the moment, it's like, sure, I think Rhaegar's in a fairly good spot as well. So with Rhaegar, for example, where's Rhaegar? Okay, Rhaegar's interesting. So Rhaegar, he's level 10s. He got Ancestral Healing and Bloodlust. So So I think again maybe they could buff Bloodlust. I think Bloodlust might be like a bit of a sleeper hit here. I think Bloodlust is probably better than people think it is, but at the moment for sure Ancestral is chosen all the time because it is just so strong, because it counters single target burst and gives someone a second life essentially. But Rhaegar's got, he actually has some decent talent variety, and that's cool. Something else that's a problem with supports is the impactfulness of Cleanse, which is a bit of an issue, but I don't know if it's a huge problem to have it as a talent. Maybe it's not, because then it's cool, you have some choices when you don't need Cleanse, but maybe it's a bit too dominant. But you could you can build him for with the Lightning Bond and maybe Rising Storm, which is actually kind of cool against Illidan, by the way. It works fairly well. Or you could go for Wolf Run for more mobility, or stuff where you could get the totem talents that work together, or do you want a shield, or do you want some healing? Yeah, cool, you got some choices. Rhaegar just, he functions a lot. He can wave clear, he can do merc camps, he can do so much just by default. He's actually really good at everything by default. But what you could do is you go through, or make a hero in the future. It's okay, whatever, this support hero, he or she does everything, kind of okay-ish by default, but you spec them over the course of the game with the talents into, okay, you can either improve their damage in impactful ways through talents, or you can improve their supporting in impactful ways, their utility, or their healing, and then make it actually a choice, and don't have them shoehorned into a role. For example, Kharazim, you could build him for damage, but it's bad. Okay, you could build him for damage, but it's bad in most situations. For the most part, you're picking Kharazim as your support hero, not as this pseudo assassin, and it's okay, sure, you get a small bit of choice, but for the most part, it's just how do I heal the most? What talent build is going to heal the most? And it's not that exciting. I think Seven-Sided Strike and Divine Palm are two other excellent heroics, well designed, with both have strengths and weaknesses and very different playstyles. So that's a good balance here, much better than Rhaegar's, something sort of on the line of Tyrande's here. But for the most part, the other talent tiers are very much focused on what makes them a better healer, and that's not great. That's not great. Same thing with Uther at the moment. And Uther, I think, obviously is in need of a rework. But Uther has a very similar problem where it's okay, what talent choices are going to make me the best healer? You don't have any variety in your playstyle through your talents like Tyrande does. It's very much just okay, what makes me more effective as a healer? And it's kind of sad because, damage Uther should or could have been a thing. You got this Holy Shock, but it's damage Uther is just so bad that you can't, and that's kind of sad. So what they could do with these supports in general is go back through them, maybe even tone down some of their base healing a bit, and give them genuinely interesting talent choices, or talent decisions, so you can build them to be, a bit more focused on damage or utility, or a bit more focused on healing. I think that could, like Tyrande's a great hero. I don't really see people complaining about Tyrande or Rhaegar. Generally, I think the consensus is bring the other healers, these other supports, kind of into line with what they do. Poor old Uther is in a terrible spot at the moment. So that's one thing they could do for sure. So yes, I depth and complexity. I don't think it needs to be complexity, but certainly depth in the form of talents, and depth in terms of playstyle, and how you can build them and fitting them to the team comps. And don't have them be defined. You don't need to have all of these heroes defined. And I'd like to see more supports in future not be defined into being a healer just from the get-go. And then it's just, how do we build talents that make them a better healer? Have them have them as a support, and then even something you can do with Medivh is maybe, even if you want to fit Medivh more into this support idea, is give him a couple more talents to do healing. You go through the portals, you get a nice heal over time or something like that. I don't know. But something like that, that you can choose to spec them as you choose. And this would also give more flexibility for that second support role. Because it's okay, we have a Kharazim, you're not getting an Uther. You're not going to get an Uther. Or we've got Morales, you're not going to pick up Uther, because they're completely contradictory. And to an extent, that's fine, but I think it's a bit too prevalent. There's too many supports here. Again, like I said, the second support that you want at the moment is pretty much Tyrande or Tassadar. It's very rare that you're going to have two supports in any other sort of combination. It'd be, again, Morales and Kharazim, probably not. Or Morales and Lily, no. It's a lot of these supports, it's very, very exceptionally niche that you'd have them there. And I think having more variety come in terms of talents would open that up so that you could mix two supports much more. It would open it up to having more variety in terms of double support composition, instead of just being, well, one's a healer and then we'll bring a second one for utility, and it's kind of defined from the get-go as to what they are. use the talent system. Make this talent system work for you, Blizzard. Make it work for you. Make it do more work. Again, like Tyrande, sure, some of her talent tiers are kind of crappy, but then you got a couple that are really good and that can really swing how she plays. I think that's most of what I wanted to cover in this. Yeah, I think like initiation, again, like look at the ways of making plays, like wave clear, ability to deal with mercs. Sure, they don't want to make them assassins, they don't want to make supports good at soloing heroes, and that's fine, that fits with the role. But within the role, there's much more playmaking you can do. I think, again, this guy, Vrubranazzo's suggestion here of maybe like make these move speed buffs actually impactful, like poor old Brightwing, again, to go over this. Look at this sad level 13. Look at shield does. Reduce ability damage taken by 50%. That's a 4-second thing on a 10-second cooldown. Why? And then she also has ice block, which is great. But why would you ever take, you know, a 50, like a big move speed buff that decays over 1.5 seconds? Why is this so weak? Or again, sticky flare. This is something he also mentioned in the next paragraph. Look at this. It's like, oops. Cool. You hit them with a difficult hit arcane flare and it slows them by 40% for 2 seconds. Why is this so weak? Another idea, I think my friend Cliction was mentioning this, is you could have supports that like buff people more. You know, your support is all about buffing. Like Brightwing kind of does this. You know, she gives them a movement speed buff and block, or she polymorphs the enemy. That's cool. That's cool. Brightwing's a cool hero. I love her design. Actually, is really cool. Have more supports like this. You know, they'll buff your teammates. They'll give your teammates some sort of buffs, or they'll debuff the enemy heroes. You know, it doesn't all have to be in terms of healing. If they do like a buffing or debuffing hero, it would be cool, or something to do with auras, or like zone control, initiating team fights. There's a lot of stuff they can do. Yeah, I think they have. I think they need to rework the talents of these heroes. These heroes overall are fine. You could add, I think, yeah, just add more playstyle variety in their talents, which would give them, again, more variety in terms of team composition, how they play, how they can fit the build. They need more support heroes. There's very few support heroes compared to any other role. Look, here's the warriors. Oh, look. Oh, wait, no, that supports as well. Look, here's the warriors. There's far more warriors. There's 3 rows of warriors. 4 rows supports. There's not even 2 rows of supports. In terms of assassins, there's 3 and a bit rows of assassins. In terms of specialists, there's 2 and a bit rows of specialists. Supports are the most, and specialists and assassins, you can kind of even combine them together, honestly. Supports are severely lacking in terms of heroes. They need to add more and have more variety. And then I think when you do have more supports, it will also open up that quick matchmaking a bit, so you don't have to have the support roles so specifically defined. And yeah, then I would also consider also looking at this, making healing just a little bit less impactful, so that other forms of supporting can become impactful. And make Medivh support. Just, you know, grow a pair and do it, Blizzard. Just do it. Make him a support. Look, you're saying this is what supports do, and then you have him as a specialist. It's like, guys, come on, guys, make him a support. Just do it, and then make more supports like that. Add more variety. Go to the talents. Use the talents to your advantage. That's what I think, guys. Let me know what you think as well. This has been a long video, discussion video, but I think it's a really interesting topic of discussion. And yeah, I think, you know, please rework Uther and Malfurion. Karazim will survive for the moment. But yeah, like Uther and Malfurion are in a really bad spot overall, I would say, in terms of their talents. Like, go rework them soon. But yeah, that's what I think. And I think there's a lot of options. There's a lot of potential for improving the place of supports in the game at the moment. And it's cool that they know what's up. They know this needs to be done, and it's cool they're doing these discussion topics. I'm interested to see what other people have to say here as well. Those are my ideas. Kind of some of the problems they have and some solutions as well. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And thank you very, very much for watching. And yeah, I'll see you next time for the next discussion video. Or hey, check out some of my other content on the channel as well, some of the gameplay stuff if you want to see that. I also do live streams all the time, so check those out too. You can follow me on Twitter or Twitch to find out when they're live. Alright guys, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.